Welcome to The Explainer. We're jumping right into something today that literally flips the script on how we think about getting older. We're talking about redefining retirement into this vibrant, purpose-driven chapter that the source material calls the freedom years. So if you've got this idea that aging is all about winding down and taking it easy, well, get ready, because this is going to completely change your perspective. So let's just get right to the heart of it. What exactly is the secret to living life to the full in your older years? Society usually tells us that aging means stepping back, kind of quietly fading into the background. But what if those later years are actually meant to be your absolute most impactful? What if there's a specific mindset and actually a real formula to make that happen? Well, we can look at two totally different ways this plays out. Take Charles Price, for instance. Charles was this highly successful pastor who had a life-threatening heart attack in his 50s. His cardiologist gave him a really crucial piece of advice. He said, look for what energizes you. And instead of using his health as an excuse to just quit, Charles actually leaned in. He accelerated his preaching because, frankly, it gave him life. Now, on the flip side, you have Luke and Linda. They were super involved in their community, right? But after they retired and went traveling for a bit, they came back to find things had moved on. And when people asked them to help out, their default answer just became, oh, we're too old for this. They completely withdrew, stopped taking on roles, and just quietly lost their sense of purpose. So how do we make sure we don't end up like Luke and Linda? How do we capture that energy Charles had? Well, the author points to four main pillars of the freedom years. To truly live life to the full, you need a solid balance of these four things: purpose and vision, talents and strengths, people and relationships, and plans and activities. It's honestly like a four-legged stool. If any one of these is missing, the whole thing wobbles. Your vision fades, and your talents just kind of go to waste. And look, if you're sitting there thinking, well, my best years are definitely behind me, consider this for a second. Historically, and biblically for that matter, age is literally just a number when it comes to fulfilling your purpose. I mean, Frank Lloyd Wright designed the iconic Guggenheim Museum when he was 76. Nelson Mandela, elected president of South Africa at 75. And Nola Oakes actually became the oldest college graduate at 95 years old. No way, right?
And that brings us to this absolutely staggering number, 100. Faja Singh ran a full marathon at the age of 100. Just let that sink in for a second. A marathon at 100. These examples really drive home a core point from our source material today. Growth, stretching yourself, and staying active, those are choices we have to make every single day.
Now, this whole concept isn't just some abstract theory. It actually comes directly from the author's own life, a major turning point. At 58, after this incredibly successful corporate career, he was suddenly fired. And on top of that, he was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which is an untreatable chronic condition. So overnight, his entire corporate identity is just gone. He's standing at this massive crossroad, having to ask himself a really heavy question. Does God still have a purpose for someone like me?
To find the answer, the text actually takes us all the way back to the Hebrew roots of the creation story in Genesis. The really crucial thing to understand here is this word, tov. When God looked at creation and called it good, he wasn't just saying, oh, that looks pretty. The Hebrew word tov actually means functionally excellent, or working exactly as intended. So just like creation, you are good when you're functioning within the specific purpose you were designed for.
The early church fathers actually took this grand, lifelong purpose and simplified it down to one really beautiful sentence. They said, the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. And the author points out that this applies to you whether you're 25 or 85. Finding purpose simply means doing anything that glorifies God and deepens your joy in him. That's the whole shebang. Facing his job loss and this chronic illness, the author was seriously tempted to just throw in the towel and take early disability retirement. But a specific biblical insight from Proverbs completely stopped him in his tracks. Without a vision, people perish. That verse pushed him to reject apathy. He realized that without a vision, we aren't really living, right? We're just existing. So he made the incredibly tough choice of faith over comfort during a really uncertain time. The text actually presents this really beautiful analogy. You know that question, what do you want to be when you grow up? We usually think of that as something you only ask a 5-year-old. But the author suggests that God, being a perfect parent, actually keeps asking us this question even into our later years. My child, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because he wants us to have dreams and hopes and a vision grounded in his promises, no matter what stage of life we're in. Okay, so to actually put this into practice, we first need to clear something up. We've got to distinguish between two words people mix up all the time: talents and strengths. Talents are your raw, inborn abilities. Actually, neurologists say these start forming as neural pathways while you're still in the womb. Strengths, on the other hand, are deliberately developed over time.
So, how exactly do you bridge that gap? How do you take a raw talent and turn it into a mature strength? Well, it's a pretty logical three-step process. First, you acquire knowledge. Second, you practice the skills. And third, you gain experience. Think of it like learning to drive. You might have a totally natural talent for hand-eye coordination, but to actually be a good driver, you have to know the rules of the road, you need the physical skill of turning the wheel, and you need years of experience navigating different weather and crazy traffic.
And this perfectly leads into the author's formula for strengths. It's talents multiplied by knowledge, skills, and experience, which equals your strengths. Now think about this in the context of getting older. Your later years naturally provide the absolute richest laboratory for experience. The longer you've been alive, the more raw material you have to build these incredible strengths and wisdom. It's a huge advantage. So why does developing these strengths matter so much for your freedom years? Well, just listen to this massive stat. According to Gallup, people who use their talents and strengths every single day report a 300% higher quality of life. 300%! That is an absolute game changer. But right next to that amazing statistic is a pretty sad reality. Gallup also found that only 17% of people are actually using their strengths every day, which means a massive 83% of people are just leaving their greatest potential and a vastly improved quality of life completely on the table. To explain why that 83% even exists, the author quotes the legendary business expert Peter Drucker, who said, "Most people do not know their strengths, and the majority of those who think they do are often wrong." And that right there highlights exactly why intentional self-discovery is absolutely critical when you enter your freedom years. I mean, you can't use a tool if you don't even know it's in your toolbox, right? To help with that discovery process, psychologists have actually grouped thousands of different talents into broad strengths themes. So, do you naturally love setting goals? Well, you might have the achieving theme. Do you naturally just bring order to pure chaos? That's the organizer theme. Do people just listen when you walk into a room? That's presence. I'd really encourage you to take a second and reflect on which of these buckets your own God-given talents might fall into. Which brings us to our final, really provocative question for this explainer. When you cross that threshold into your later years, will you choose to be like Luke and Linda and just kind of exist in retirement, slowly withdrawing from the world? Or are you going to actively discover and use your unique strengths to step into your freedom years, glorify your creator, and live life to the absolute full? The choice and the opportunity for an incredible second act is entirely up to you. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I will catch you in the next one.